All right. So, Keith Nestor, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. It's good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, good to see you. Always an honor to have you back on. Back by popular demand. I had, quite a few people asked for you to come back on, and I've been wanting you to come back on the show anyway. So,
Well, thank you to those people who asked. I appreciate that.
yeah, and they came up with a really good idea. They were asking to have you on to talk about, how can we as faithful Catholics in our own parish life be good Catholics in that context there and make a difference on the local level, on the parish level. And I thought that is a really good show topic. And they were spot on in saying you would be a really good person to talk about that. And so here we are.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that's something I'm very passionate about. And I think that when I became Catholic in 2017, I came over from being a pastor working in that local church setting. And I think sometimes people who come from that background have a little bit of a different take on this because, the individual parish life in that level seems like it's a lot more emphasized sometimes in the Protestant world because there's much more of a stake in what's happening at that local church level. In the Catholic Church, you can bounce around parish to parish. If one parish isn't what you like, you can go to another one and you're still within the family of Catholicism. So, which I think is great. I love that. But when you're like in a Protestant congregation, especially one that isn't connected to a denomination, there's like everything has to be contained in that environment. And sometimes I think in Catholic parishes, we can rightfully view our connection as being bigger than the local parish, which I think is great. But sometimes we can then maybe neglect some things about that local parish life that would be helpful to people as they're on their journey as a Catholic.
That is a really good observation, because one thing that I noticed coming from a Protestant background is, when I was part of these local Protestant congregations, it was much more intimate because the church itself was less centralized. There wasn't some hierarchy way over this parish. It was much more of a local thing. And so the fellowship was much more localized. The emphasis was localized on that particular congregation, on the particular pastor or elders and so on. And then shifting over to Catholicism, I noticed it was very different. It's not at all, in many cases at least. There are some exceptions, but in many cases it wasn't at all like that local experience. It was rather much more centralized in the hierarchy. So as you said, you can kind of go from one parish to another and people don't really notice the difference because you're part of this larger community rather than just something that is localized. So that's a very helpful observation.
Well, I think that's something too that a lot of cradle Catholics, they've never really experienced that. So it's sort of like a weird dynamic. And again, there's pros and cons to that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's and it all depends on what's going on at your local parish level. If things are rough, you can take heart in the fact that, Catholicism is bigger than that one local parish. But if there can also be an obstacle to really working hard at that local parish to make it the best it can be sometimes, because people can just go, oh, well, why do I need to suffer through this one when I can just go down the road when they have, whatever, which kind of sounds like more Protestant than Catholic, but I've seen it happen. And, I think so I guess there are some principles I'd like to talk about today with regard to how we can navigate through that. And the first one being this.
Oh, and before you do that, let me just follow up with something that you just pointed out here, because it's a good observation. I've noticed, like, if there's something going on at the local Catholic parish level that they don't like, maybe liturgically, you might have those people who are solid in liturgy sing the stuff that they don't really like, and then they will go to a different community that really fulfills that liturgical expression that they desire.
Yeah.
And therefore it kind of strengthens that other parish. And then this one becomes even weaker because the ones that are solid on the liturgy are more attracted to that other parish than this one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an issue. And I live in that world every day. I mean, I drive past several Catholic churches, several what I would say are good Catholic churches on the way to the parish that I go that has the TLM, But here's kind of the issue that I think we need to think about here. Some of the things I'm going to say have to deal with things that we as lay people have control over, and some of the things we don't have control over.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to recognize the difference. Okay. And understanding that our first priority as Catholics, especially as, our context as the fathers of, the heads of our families, okay, husbands and fathers, I'm speaking from that perspective. Our first priority is to raise our families in the faith and to make sure that they're experiencing things that are helpful to their faith. And sadly, there are sometimes some things in Catholic parishes these days that aren't as helpful as I wish they were.
Yeah.
So I think we have to say, okay, where's the tension? There's a tension that exists between doing what's best for my family in terms of their liturgical life versus what's best for this particular local parish. Some of that interplay is going to depend on what's going on in the leadership. So here's what I mean. If you have a priest who is trying to make things better and trying to improve things and is looking around saying, I need people that are going to help me make this parish more solidly Catholic and more, liturgically sound, and everybody leaves, I feel bad for that priest, right? That's tough. But if we have a priest who's saying, no, we're doing it this way, we're not going to listen to what the church teaches. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to veer away from the tradition of the Catholic faith and do our own things. Well, then there's not as much you can do.
Yeah.
So keep that first principle in mind of making sure that you are doing the things that are going to be helpful to your soul. But I would say, if you have a priest that's wanting to improve things, wanting to make things better, and everyone just leaves, I feel bad for that priest. So I think what we have to do is this: we have to be in prayer and willing to be God for whatever God wants to do with us. Too often times, we critique Protestantism a lot in the Catholic world and say, oh, they're just out for themselves. They're just trying to do what makes them feel good and whatever. But we have to make sure that we're not doing the same thing. We have to make sure that we're not also going, well, I don't care about what this other parish needs that I'm connected to. I'm going over here. So there's that tension. So, and I think what it boils down to is this: we all have to do what the Spirit leads us to do. And if the Spirit of God is saying, hey, I placed you in this parish for a reason, you're supposed to be a help and a resource, then even though it might be a little bit tough, you should hang out there, But if the Spirit of God is saying, no, this isn't where I have you. And I know that might sound kind of like, hokey or whatever, but so there's an element of every decision that you make being led by your leading of the Spirit, what God's doing in your life. And at the same time, being completely faithful as a Catholic to fulfill your obligations and to do what you have to do. So on one end, the principle is, you are fulfilling your obligations and you're being faithful in your worship of the living God as a Catholic. The second principle I think that's important, that I think sometimes we can overlook, is the principle of evangelism and understanding that maybe God has you in a particular spot to be a resource to people that are coming into the faith. How are people being received when they come into the faith? What does it feel like to be a brand new person, maybe who's not Catholic, who is feeling led to be Catholic, who's being drawn in, and they walk into your parish for the first time? What is that experience going to be like for that person? And what can we do to make that a positive experience for people without, going down some of those errors of turning it into like a seeker-sensitive service where we're watering down the faith?
What if you have a situation where, okay, you have a priest that you kind of mentioned, a situation where a priest kind of says, all right, we're not going to do what the church teaches and we're going to kind of go our own way. What if you have one of those situations? How is a faithful Catholic supposed to approach that? Or should they just leave and go to a different parish, or do they try to work from within?
Well, my personal opinion is that you should approach that priest in love and humility and have a conversation about that. Find out what you're dealing with. Are you dealing with someone who is intentionally trying to take people away from the faith? Or are you dealing with someone who just is maybe not as competent as another person? right? I think there's a big difference in a person's heart and their intent in that. And I would say this, you're not going to really know that until you try to be a resource to that person. And here's the other thing I would say, if you're going to go complain to your priest about the way things are, you'd better be willing to be part of a solution, not just someone who is going in there and throwing, a hand grenade in the room and leaving.
Yeah.
So I think too many times, and I experienced this as a pastor too, people would come in, they go, "Oh, we're leaving the church because you did this, 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 and this, or we don't have this, we don't have this, or we don't have this." And I'm like, man, I've been trying to do that,
Yeah.
Will you help? No, we're just going to a place that does.
Yeah.
That's really hard on a pastor, and on a priest.
Mm.
So be willing to be part of that solution. Now, if you go and talk to that priest and he's just like, let's just create an example here, Michael. Let's say you're talking about confession. Okay. This is a common issue that people talk about. There's not enough confession times. It's too hard to get the sacrament of reconciliation in my parish. You go to your priest and you say, Father, is there any way that we can figure out an opportunity for there to be more confession? And he says, "Oh, I would love to do that. I'm just getting beaten down because I have to mow the grass because nobody's coming to help me with that. Or I have all these other tasks I have to do and I don't have enough people to help me with this administration. I would love to be able to sit in the confessional for 2 hours a day, but here are all the things that are standing in the way." That's a different response than someone saying, "Well, no, we don't need that." That you have a half an hour once a week, you just deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you have to be able to hear from that person what their issue is. And if, there's an opportunity to say, "Oh, well, you want to sit in the confessional more if you get some help? Hey, what can I do to take some of those things off your plate so you can do that?" Versus a priest who's just saying, "Well, no, I just don't want to." That's different. And personally, like, here's where I'm coming from. I would choose to be a part of a solution if that was something I felt could be helpful. But if a priest was just like, "No, I don't care, I'm not doing this," I probably wouldn't stick around.
Yeah.
Maybe that's wrong. I don't know, but
yeah, it's hard to do good within, I guess, in that context. I mean, because like you said, there's only so much that we can do as laity.
Well, and people might say, "Oh, well, you're just picking up your toys and leaving." Actually, no, I think that is a more respectful thing to do, because one of the beautiful things about Catholicism is, we do have this greater community that I think the most disrespectful thing you could do is stay and be a thorn in his side with, when you can't do anything to change it,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't want to change, Okay. But, maybe I have a pie in the sky mentality, Michael. I don't know. But I think most priests want to do a good job. I think most priests want to be good leaders of their flock and want to do those things. It's just they might not be able to. A lot of the priests I know are super slammed. They're super busy, and they just don't have time to accommodate everybody's programmatic ideas and everybody's, desires of these things. And I think that's where you need a healthy local parish to pick up some of that slack and to do some of those things. And I think so the principle of fulfilling our own obligations that we have to do to be good Catholics, helping those that are coming in that are new to have a good experience and to show them a good example of the faith. And then the third one is doing whatever you can to offer your gifts and resources to your parish to make it that most healthy that it can be. And I think we could stay pretty busy if we did that.
What about situations where you don't really have the opportunity to go to a different parish? Maybe you're in a territory where this is just it. This is all that's really available to me. And maybe there's situations where you've done everything that you can, but maybe the liturgy is poor. And it comes to a point where it's kind of a distraction, where it's hard to be prayerful during the liturgy because you're just kind of so distracted by some of the problems and deficiencies there. How can we have a healthy spiritual life in that context where when we go to pray, there's an obstacle to having a meaningful prayer life?
And I tell you what, I sympathize with people in that situation. That's not a situation I live in right now, but I have been, as we've traveled, I've gone to places where that has been the situation. And the thing I would say is you have two choices. You can change your situation or you can make the best of it. But what you don't get to do is not fulfill your obligations as a Catholic, right? So you can change your situation. You can say, well, we're going to drive 2 hours. We're going to drive however far, or we're going to move. I've seen people that have moved to go to different parishes. They've like literally moved their family. That's a tough thing to do. If none of those things are possible, we're just going to live in the world where that's it, man. Then I think what you have to do is you have to do the best you can in those situations and offer up the things that you can't. And I think there's incredible grace that is given and received in that type of thing, because you're coming from a place of, I want to worship the living God in the most holy, reverent way that I can. And there are distractions, there are things that are struggles, there are whatever, but I'm going to offer up those difficulties, and I'm going to receive what I can, the Eucharist. And that's why I love being Catholic, because even in the worst situation, we're still going to receive the sacrament. We're still going to receive the Lord. We're still going to hear his word preached to us. We're still going to be a part of that heavenly worship. So as tough as it is, we have to figure out a way to offer up the things that we can't control, and the things that we can control to make the most of those.
Yeah, that's helpful. Redemptive suffering and that practice. One thing that I could say, at least from experience here in this situation, where I've kind of been through what I just described there. Yeah, in some cases, people do have legitimate grievances, and there really are legitimate frustrations. In other cases, I think that they're frustrated with things that they probably shouldn't be, and there might need to be some catechesis there. I can speak from personal experience here. Some of the things that I was frustrated with that were going on liturgically in local Novus Ordo parishes, I was very offended by. I found it very difficult to have a prayer life when I'm like bothered by this stuff during the liturgy. And yeah, that was hindering my prayer life in that experience. But looking back on it, having better formation since that time and better understanding of the liturgy and theology, I look back on it and I think some of those concerns, maybe not all, but some of those concerns that I was really getting fixated on, I really should not have been concerned by, and they should not have been something that hindered my prayer life. It was rather a deficiency of catechesis on my part. And if I had only known better, I would have realized, okay, actually, this is not something to be upset by. And if you're going to be upset by this, you would have to be upset by the vast majority of these liturgies throughout the ages. And, and so you've got to be more consistent. And so a lack of catechesis sometimes is at the heart of some of this, I think.
Well, I think that's a really, really good point, because let's face it, some of the things, and I can speak from my own experience too, I walked out of a church one time because it hadn't started yet, to be fair. Like, I've never walked out during Mass. I almost did last year. I was on the road and I went into a parish and I almost walked out during a homily. Okay. It wasn't heretical, but it was just really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes we have to recognize the difference between things that offend us personally because of just our own preferences versus things that are maybe have departed from the faith. Okay. So it's kind of like the difference between style, right? I personally, I don't like piano masses with, Billy Joel music, kind of Elton John playing. I hate it. I don't like it. So for me, like, if I walk into a parish and everything's played on a piano and it's all, I'm just like, I don't, whatever. Now, does that mean that mass is illegitimate or illicit or anything like that, and that theologically there's like some kind of heresy going on? I don't think so. But so I have to make that distinction to go, okay, where is it just Keith and his issue here versus where, there would be something that I would have to say, nope, okay, we're not doing that. If a priest ever gets up there and just on purpose butchers the Eucharistic prayer and the liturgy and whatever, then now you're not talking about, well, I like this kind of music versus that kind of music. So that's where your comments about catechesis come in. Sometimes I think we don't, and I see this a lot with people, Michael. A lot of people don't make that difference. They think if they don't like it because of the style, that's the same thing as something being illegitimate or heretical. So you see that happen sometimes where people are just like, oh, well, they sang these goofy 70s Novus Ordo hymns, therefore this mass, can't be pleasing to God. Well, it's certainly not pleasing to me, but I can't, that's not the same criticism as someone who has like purposely gone into heresy or something like that. So I think sometimes we have to recognize what's us and what's like, beyond us.
But sometimes due to poor catechesis, we think that something that really is just kind of an us thing, we think it's equal to the faith, like you're pointing out here. You think it's heresy or something, and it's like, okay, no, we need some better formation here.
That's a great point. And I think what would be awesome about that is if you could talk to your priest. If I went and I talked to my priest and I said, man, I really don't like it when, whatever, this part of the mass is this and that, he might be able to say to me, well, okay, I understand that that's your personal opinion. You don't like that, but here's where this fits into the rubrics of the liturgy. Therefore, it's still okay. But, well, I was told that was, evil and horrible. And, that and I'll give you a good example, and everyone's going to hate me for saying this, but, communion on the hand. Okay. I don't receive communion on the hand. When I go to receive communion, I kneel and I take it on the tongue. Okay. That's just I want people to understand that's where I'm coming from personally. But for people who say things like communion on the hand is always inherently, without full stop, that's, irreverent, heretical disobedience to Jesus. I don't think you can really, like, that's just not true. That's just not true. There was a time in history when communion was on the hand, in the ancient church too. So you can't say that, but I think people don't have that catechesis. They think that, no, this is what it means. Now, again, am I making the case for communion? I would make the case right now for communion on the hand to be abolished. I don't like it, like, personally. That's me personally. And I have good reasons for saying that. But at the same time, I can't take my personal view and elevate that to say, well, then anyone who disagrees with me or does it this way is automatically an irreverent heretic.
Yeah. And to be fair, I wouldn't even say this is an issue of a personal view on your part. I think that you have every right to say, I think in the Roman Rite, the most preferential and ideal practice would be communion on the tongue, without falling into the notion that somehow communion on the hand is intrinsically evil or sacrilegious or something. Yeah, we don't have to fall into that, but I think you could still make a good case that, no, but I actually think that communion on the tongue is ideal, and here's why.
And I do, and that's like my point. Like it's not just, I think it's more fun. No, I have legit reasons in my own mind for why I think that. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm acknowledging the fact that the church has decreed that this is for whatever circumstance, for whatever reason, this is allowed, and we have to default to what Holy Mother Church says, and and go with that. But from a stylistic perspective, there may be things that you or I prefer or don't prefer, but like you said, because of catechesis, sometimes we elevate those things to what's Orthodox and what's not.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like, I've heard stories where people have visited, an Eastern Catholic liturgy and seen that people stand usually the whole time during the liturgy, and they're horrified by that. And they think, wait, I thought standing was bad and irreverent. No, in the Eastern tradition, standing is how you show the most reverence. Sitting or kneeling shows something else. And so standing is the highest form of reverence one can show from the Eastern tradition. So there's maybe a lack of catechesis there on the person who apprehends
great example.
this. Yeah. Or even another is the antiteron, the prosphora bread that, is cut out. Part of it then is consecrated and becomes Eucharist. Well, the remaining loaf, the remaining part that is not consecrated and confected into the Eucharist, is just set aside, and it's just given a simple blessing. And that is then distributed, that prosphora bread that hasn't become the Eucharist is then distributed to everybody, whether they're Catholic or not, at the end of the liturgy. And I've heard horror stories of people who are Catholics thinking, oh, wait, what in the world? You guys are handing out this prosphora bread to people who aren't Catholics. You're giving communion to non-Catholics, and then there's crumbs of it spilling everywhere on the floor. You're desecrating the body of the Lord. And it's like, no, this is a lack of catechesis on your part. This isn't the Eucharist. This is just prosphora bread that has just been simply blessed. And it's just there to show a sign of unity and welcoming. We're welcoming you as a non-Christian or a non-Catholic, you know.
That's a great example. I think, your point before about catechesis, I think that's really the answer to a lot of the issues, is exploring, what does the faith teach and how do we express that? And when we oftentimes learn the why behind the what, it just helps everybody to grow in deeper ways.
I know we're coming to the end of the show here. So do you have any other points that come to mind that you think would be helpful for us to know about how to be productive in our parish life?
I think we just have to remember those three pieces. We have to worship God the best that we can. We have to be eyes wide open to how God wants to use us in our parish to bring people into the faith. So that might impact some things that we do, and to make ourselves more hospitable and open to people who need to know the Lord and need to be brought into the Catholic faith. And then we also need to be led by the Spirit and be a resource and a help to the leadership in the ways that we can. I think those are general principles that are going to get fleshed out in lots of different ways. But I think each of us is sort of wired inherently toward one of those ways, to where we have to be reminded of the other two. A lot of us are wired to be really focused on ourselves and what is good for me and my family. And we often forget about other people around us. Other people are super focused on what's going on at the parish level and this and that, but they don't do anything for themselves, and so I think that having a balanced approach to this is going to be helpful. But the most important thing is to remember that when you offer yourself to the Lord, he's going to use you, and he's going to, and make yourself available to God. Pray that prayer. God, use me in this parish to help me make it more honorable and holy, and to make it better for you. I'm your servant. I belong to this, and I want to be the best son or daughter of the church that I can, even in this parish setting. And make yourself known to your priest as someone who is going to be a help in making that the best parish that it can be. And I think a lot of awesome things can come as a result of that.
That's helpful. Can tell us a little bit about your channel, the Rosary Crew,
sure.
and stuff like that you're doing?
Yeah, so my ministry is called Down to Earth, and I have a website, down2earthministry.org. It's down, the number 2 earthministry.org. And most of what I do has been centered on, I do a lot of things on YouTube. We have a live stream rosary every day called the Rosary Crew with Keith Nestor. That's its own YouTube channel. We pray every day. We've been doing that for almost 4 years now. It's been awesome. We just get together to pray. We don't talk about church politics. We don't talk about what's going on in the country. We're like, okay, we're a big tent because I want to unite everybody around prayer. So we pray the rosary every day. And then I also, on my other YouTube channel, just called Keith Nestor, I do a weekly podcast called Unpacking the Mass, where I'm just going to walk through the upcoming readings for the Mass, so that when you come to church, your heart is prepared, your ears are ready to hear. And so it's kind of in the style of what I used to do as a pastor when I would preach. I go through the readings and I just kind of share some perspective on them. It's an opportunity just to get yourself ready. And that comes out every Tuesday on my YouTube channel. And then I make other videos on there about things related to the faith as well. And I have a couple of books. I have a book called The Convert's Guide to Roman Catholicism, Your First Year in the Church. And then I wrote a book on the mysteries of the Rosary called Unpacking the Mysteries of the Rosary.
And I will certainly put links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Keith, for your ministry and what you're doing and praying with people and ministering to them. I really do appreciate it, with the good that you're doing in your ministry.
Likewise, Michael, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful for you. And for those of you that don't know, we got to go down on one of our last rosary trips and spend a little time with Michael and his family there in his place. And we just had a great time with you guys hanging out. And we hope we can get with you again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah. Next time you're out here, definitely swing by. Absolutely.
Well, God
Well,
bless
thank
you,
you.
Michael. God bless all of you that are watching. Thank you guys for your support for Michael and for all that you're doing to enrich the church. Keep praying, keep focused, and keep doing what you can to show everybody the beauty of the Catholic faith.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was an honor.
Thanks, Michael.
Everybody hit that like button and the subscribe button, and go subscribe to Keith Nestor's channel if you haven't already. We'll see you later. God bless. Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy, and engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy.